1 o'clock in the morning, I started writing as if Frank Sinatra were writing the lyrics. So I started metaphorically with a now, the end is near, final curtain. I finish it. I called him
How
up.
long does that take you to finish?
5 hours.
5 hours you wrote the entire song My Way?
Yeah.
Put your head on my shoulder.
Paul Anka, a name synonymous with classic pop and timeless music, is a legendary figure in the music industry whose career has spanned over 7 decades. From his early beginnings as a teenage heartthrob to his later years as a respected songwriter and performer, Anka's journey through the world of music is one filled with triumphs, challenges, and an unwavering dedication to his craft. And at the age of 83, Paul Anka has revealed the sad truth. What is it he exactly revealed? Well, we'll be revealing that in one moment. But first, let's explore who Paul Anka truly is. Early life and beginnings. Paul Albert Anka was born on July 30th, 1941, in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, into a warm and culturally rich Lebanese family. His parents, Andrew Emil, Andy, Anka, and Camelia, Tanis, Anka, were both of Lebanese descent, and they played a significant role in shaping Paul's early life. Andy Anka owned a popular restaurant called the Locanda in the heart of Ottawa, which was not only a business but also a gathering place for the local community. Camelia, on the other hand, was a homemaker who ensured that the Anka household was filled with love, warmth, and a strong sense of cultural identity. Paul Anka was the eldest of 3 children, with a younger brother and sister. Growing up in a close-knit family, Paul was deeply influenced by his parents' values and the rich tapestry of Lebanese traditions that were woven into their everyday lives. The Anka household was a place where music, food, and storytelling played central roles, and these elements became integral to Paul's development. From a very young age, Paul displayed a natural affinity for music. His parents recognized his talent early on, and they encouraged him to pursue his interests. The family's strong ties to the St. Elijah Syrian Orthodox Church in Ottawa provided Paul with his first formal exposure to music. At the age of 11, he began singing in the church choir, where he developed his vocal skills and gained confidence as a performer. The church was not just a place of worship for the Anka family. It was a community hub where cultural and social ties were strengthened, and Paul's participation in the choir was a significant part of his early life. The diverse cultural environment in which Paul grew up also played a crucial role in shaping his musical tastes. Ottawa in the 1940s and 1950s was a melting pot of cultures, and Paul was exposed to a wide range of musical influences from an early age. His father's restaurant often hosted musicians and entertainers, and Paul would frequently be found listening intently to the live performances. This exposure to different styles of music, from traditional Middle Eastern melodies to contemporary Western pop, helped Paul develop a unique musical sensibility that would later define his career. In addition to his vocal talents, Paul was a self-taught musician. He had an innate curiosity and determination to learn how to play musical instruments, and he taught himself to play the piano and guitar. These skills would prove invaluable as he began to experiment with songwriting during his teenage years. Paul's early compositions were influenced by the popular music of the time, including the smooth sounds of Frank Sinatra, the crooning style of Nat King Cole, and the classic tunes of Patti Page. These artists were among Paul's earliest musical heroes, and their influence can be heard in the romantic ballads and melodic structures that became hallmarks of his music. As a teenager, Paul attended Fisher Park High School in Ottawa, where he was known for his charismatic personality and love of music. Despite being a good student, Paul's passion for music often took precedence over his academic pursuits. He formed a vocal group called the Bobby Soxers with some of his friends, and they performed at local events and school functions. These early performances gave Paul a taste of the spotlight and fueled his desire to pursue a career in music. Paul's drive to succeed in the music industry was evident from a young age. He was ambitious, determined, and willing to take risks to achieve his goals. At just 14 years old, Paul made a bold decision that would change the course of his life. In 1956, he convinced his parents to let him travel to Los Angeles to visit his uncle, Maurice Tanis, who was a prominent figure in the entertainment industry. This trip would prove to be a pivotal moment in Paul's life, as it marked the beginning of his journey toward becoming a professional musician. While in Los Angeles, Paul sought out every opportunity to immerse himself in the music scene. He was determined to make connections and learn as much as he could about the industry. During his stay, Paul attended recording sessions, visited radio stations, and met with music executives. His persistence paid off when he managed to arrange a meeting with Don Costa, an arranger and A&R man for ABC Paramount Records. Costa was impressed with Paul's talent and saw potential in the young artist. After hearing some of Paul's original compositions, Costa decided to sign him to the label. Paul's first single, Blau Wild Deverest Fontaine, was released in 1956, but it failed to make an impact on the charts. Despite this initial setback, Paul remained undeterred. He continued to write songs and hone his craft, knowing that his big break was just around the corner. That break came in 1957, when Paul wrote a song that would change his life forever. Inspired by his unrequited crush on a girl named Diana Ayub, who was 5 years older than him, Paul penned the song Diana. The song captured the intensity of teenage infatuation, and its catchy melody and heartfelt lyrics resonated with listeners. When Diana was released as a single, it became an instant hit, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and selling over 10 million copies worldwide. The success of Diana catapulted Paul Anka into the spotlight and established him as a teenage sensation. With Diana, Paul Anka had arrived on the international music scene. At just 16 years old, he was thrust into the world of fame and celebrity, becoming one of the most popular young artists of the late 1950s. The success of Diana marked the beginning of a remarkable career that would see Paul Anka evolve from a teenage heartthrob into one of the most respected and enduring figures in the music industry. Early music career. Paul Anka's early music career is a remarkable tale of youthful ambition, raw talent, and a drive to succeed that set him apart from his peers. After the success of his breakout hit Diana in 1957, Anka quickly solidified his status as one of the era's premier teen idols. He was just 16 years old, but his smooth voice, good looks, and relatable lyrics struck a chord with audiences worldwide, marking the beginning of a prolific and enduring career. Following Diana, Anka wasted no time capitalizing on his newfound fame. He followed up with a series of hits that demonstrated not only his consistency as a performer, but also his growing prowess as a songwriter. Songs like You Are My Destiny, Lonely Boy, Put Your Head on My Shoulder, and Puppy Love became anthems for a generation of teenagers navigating the complexities of love and life. Each of these songs showcased Anka's ability to tap into universal emotions with a sincerity that resonated deeply with his audience. You Are My Destiny, released shortly after Diana, became another major hit for Anka, reaching the top 10 in several countries. The song's polished arrangement and heartfelt lyrics reinforced Anka's reputation as a master of the pop ballad. His next major success, Lonely Boy, released in 1959, became one of his signature songs. It was his first song to reach #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and its success was a testament to Anka's deepening understanding of the pop music landscape. The song's themes of adolescent loneliness and yearning were perfectly tailored to the teenage audience that had embraced Anka as their own. Put Your Head on My Shoulder, another hit from 1959, further cemented Anka's status as a teen idol. The song, with its tender lyrics and soothing melody, became a quintessential slow dance number, a staple at proms and school dances across North America. It showcased Anka's ability to craft songs that were both emotionally resonant and commercially successful, a balance that would become a hallmark of his career. One of Anka's most enduring early hits, Puppy Love, was released in 1960. Written about his relationship with actress Annette Funicello, the song captured the innocent and often intense emotions of young love. Puppy Love became an instant hit, particularly among young listeners who saw their own experiences reflected in Anka's lyrics. The song's success also highlighted Anka's growing confidence as a songwriter who could convey complex emotions in simple, relatable terms. Beyond his solo work, Anka was also making a name for himself as a songwriter for other artists. In 1959, he wrote It Doesn't Matter Anymore for Buddy Holly, which became a posthumous hit following Holly's tragic death in a plane crash. This song demonstrated Anka's versatility and ability to write for different voices and styles, further expanding his influence in the music industry. Anka's early music career was characterized by a relentless work ethic. He was constantly touring, recording, and promoting his music. This period was a whirlwind of activity, with Anka often performing multiple shows a day and traveling extensively to reach his rapidly growing fan base. Despite the grueling schedule, Anka remained committed to his craft, continually writing new material and refining his performances. One of the keys to Anka's success during this period was his keen understanding of the music industry and his ability to adapt to its demands. He was not content to rely solely on his good looks and charm. He worked hard to develop his skills as a performer and songwriter. Anka took an active role in the production of his music, often collaborating closely with arrangers and producers to ensure that his songs had the desired impact. By the early 1960s, Paul Anka had firmly established himself as one of the leading figures in pop music. It Doesn't Matter Anymore is a poignant example of Anka's ability to write songs that are timeless and emotionally resonant, regardless of who performs them. Anka's songwriting reached new heights in 1969 with one of his most iconic works, My Way. Originally a French song titled Comme d'habitude, Anka acquired the rights and wrote English lyrics tailored specifically for Frank Sinatra. Anka's version, My Way, was more than just a translation. It was a complete reimagining that reflected the introspective and self-assured persona of Sinatra. The song became an instant classic, embodying the essence of Sinatra's career and philosophy. My Way is now considered one of the most enduring songs in the history of popular music, and it has been covered by countless artists, including Elvis Presley, Aretha Franklin, and Sid Vicious. The success of My Way not only cemented Anka's status as one of the most important songwriters of his generation, but also demonstrated his ability to write for diverse voices. The song's structure, lyrical depth, and emotional resonance made it a perfect fit for Sinatra, showcasing Anka's keen understanding of the artists he worked with. It is this ability to tailor songs to the unique strengths of different performers that has made Anka such a sought-after songwriter. Another significant hit penned by Anka was She's a Lady, which became a signature song for Tom Jones in 1971. The song's driving rhythm and bold lyrics perfectly matched Jones's powerful voice and charismatic stage presence. She's a Lady became one of Jones's biggest hits, and further showcased Anka's versatility as a songwriter who could write across genres, from pop ballads to more upbeat rock-influenced tracks. Anka's songwriting was not confined to pop and rock. He also made notable contributions to the world of television. In 1962, he composed Johnny's Theme, the instrumental theme for The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. The theme became one of the most recognizable pieces of music in American television history, and it was used throughout Carson's 30-year tenure on the show. This achievement highlighted Anka's ability to write music that could transcend the boundaries of radio and records, reaching into other mediums and becoming part of the cultural fabric. Despite his numerous hits, what truly set Anka apart as a songwriter was his adaptability and willingness to evolve with the times. In the 1970s and 1980s, as musical tastes shifted, Anka continued to write and produce songs that resonated with both new and old audiences. His ability to stay relevant in a rapidly changing industry is a testament to his deep understanding of music and his commitment to his craft. In 1974, Anka co-wrote the hit song You're Having My Baby, which he performed as a duet with Odia Coates. The song was a commercial success, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Although the song sparked some controversy due to its lyrics, which were criticized by some for being sexist, it nonetheless demonstrated Anka's continued ability to write songs that could capture the public's attention. Throughout his career, Anka's songwriting has been characterized by a blend of emotion, melody, and lyrical insight. Whether writing for himself or others, he has consistently produced songs that are both musically sophisticated and accessible, a rare combination that has earned him a lasting place in music history. Anka's songwriting legacy is not just in the number of hits he has written, but in the way those songs have touched the lives of millions of people around the world. His work continues to inspire new generations of songwriters and musicians, ensuring that his influence will be felt for years to come. Relationship with Frank Sinatra. Paul Anka's relationship with Frank Sinatra was one of the most significant and defining friendships of his career, rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and a shared love for music. It was a bond that spanned several decades, during which Anka and Sinatra not only collaborated on some of the most iconic music of the 20th century, but also shared personal moments that highlighted the depth of their friendship. The origins of their relationship date back to the late 1950s, when Paul Anka was just beginning to make his mark in the music industry. At the time, Sinatra was already an established superstar, a member of the legendary Rat Pack, and a cultural icon. Despite the vast difference in their ages and careers, Anka was deeply influenced by Sinatra's music and stage presence. Sinatra represented everything Anka aspired to be, a consummate performer with an undeniable charisma and a voice that could captivate audiences. Anka first met Sinatra in the late 1950s, through mutual connections in the music industry. The encounter left a lasting impression on the young Anka. Sinatra, who was known for his discerning taste in music and his strong personality, took a liking to Anka, seeing potential in the young singer-songwriter. Anka, in turn, was awed by Sinatra's presence, but also determined to earn his respect. This meeting was the beginning of a friendship that would grow stronger over the years, shaped by their professional collaborations and personal interactions. One of the most significant moments in their relationship came in 1969 when Anka wrote the English lyrics for My Way, a song that would become synonymous with Sinatra. Originally a French song titled Comme d'habitude, Anka heard it during a trip to Paris and immediately recognized its potential. He acquired the rights to the song and, in a burst of inspiration, wrote new lyrics that reflected Sinatra's life and career. The lyrics of My Way were a perfect match for Sinatra's persona, reflective, defiant, and filled with a sense of triumph over life's challenges. Anka famously tailored the song specifically for Sinatra, capturing the essence of his friend's journey in the entertainment industry and his approach to life. The line, "I did it my way," became an anthem of self-determination and independence, resonating not only with Sinatra, but with audiences worldwide. When Anka presented the song to Sinatra, he was reportedly moved by how well it captured his own feelings and experiences. Sinatra's recording of My Way was an instant success, and it became one of his most iconic songs, deeply associated with his legacy. My Way solidified the bond between Anka and Sinatra. It wasn't just a song, it was a testament to their friendship and to Anka's deep understanding of who Sinatra was as both an artist and a person. Sinatra performed My Way in nearly every concert until his retirement, and the song's association with him is so strong that it is often considered his musical autobiography. The success of My Way also elevated Anka's status in the music industry, showing that he could write not just for himself, but for one of the greatest voices of all time. Beyond their professional collaboration, Anka and Sinatra shared many personal moments that illustrated the depth of their friendship. Anka often spoke of how Sinatra was like a mentor to him, offering advice not just on music, but on life in general. Sinatra's larger-than-life personality and his experiences in the industry provided valuable lessons for Anka, who was navigating the complexities of fame at a young age. Despite Sinatra's tough exterior, Anka saw a more vulnerable human side of him, a man who was fiercely loyal to his friends and passionate about his craft. Their friendship also extended to their families. Anka was welcomed into the Sinatra inner circle, and the two men spent time together outside of their professional lives, enjoying dinners, social events, and the camaraderie that came with being part of the same industry. Sinatra, who was known for his close-knit group of friends, counted Anka among his trusted confidants. This was no small feat, given Sinatra's well-documented reputation for keeping a tight circle of loyal friends. As Sinatra aged and his health began to decline, Anka remained close to him, offering support and friendship. He often reflected on how Sinatra's influence shaped his own career, noting that the lessons he learned from Sinatra went far beyond music. Anka admired Sinatra's ability to remain true to himself, even in the face of adversity, and this was something he carried with him throughout his own life and career. One of the poignant aspects of their friendship was how Anka continued to honor Sinatra's memory after his passing in 1998. Anka has often spoken about the impact Sinatra had on his life and career, and he has paid tribute to him in various ways over the years. In concerts, Anka would often perform My Way, dedicating it to Sinatra and sharing stories about their time together. This song, more than any other, symbolizes the enduring bond between the two artists. In his autobiography, My Way, Anka details his relationship with Sinatra, providing insights into their friendship that only someone as close as he could offer. The book recounts both the high points of their collaboration and the personal moments that defined their friendship. It serves as a testament to the significant role Sinatra played in Anka's life and the profound influence he had on his career. In summary, Paul Anka's relationship with Frank Sinatra was far more than a professional collaboration. It was a deep and enduring friendship that left an indelible mark on both of their lives. Through mutual respect, shared experiences, and iconic music like My Way, their bond became one of the most legendary friendships in the music industry. Anka's ability to capture the essence of Sinatra in song, and Sinatra's embrace of Anka as both a friend and a collaborator, speak to the unique and lasting connection they shared. Struggles and challenges. While Paul Anka's career was filled with success, it was not without its challenges. As a young artist, Anka faced the pressures of fame and the demands of the music industry. The constant touring, recording, and public appearances took a toll on his personal life. One of the biggest challenges Anka faced was the changing landscape of the music industry in the 1960s and 1970s. The rise of rock and roll and the British invasion brought about a shift in musical tastes, and many of Anka's contemporaries struggled to adapt to the new trends. Anka, however, managed to stay relevant by evolving his sound and style to fit the changing times. In the 1970s, Anka faced another challenge when his marriage to Anne de Zogeb, a former model, began to unravel. The couple married in 1963 and had 5 daughters together. However, the demands of Anka's career and the strain of being in the public eye put a strain on their relationship. The couple divorced in 2000 after 37 years of marriage. Despite these challenges, Anka remained committed to his music and continued to write, record, and perform. His resilience and determination helped him navigate the ups and downs of his career and personal life. Later, life and career. Paul Anka's later life and career reflect his remarkable ability to adapt and evolve in an ever-changing music industry while staying true to his roots as a performer and songwriter. From the 1980s onwards, Anka continued to maintain his presence in the music world, expanding his repertoire, exploring new avenues, and solidifying his legacy as one of the most enduring figures in popular music. In the 1980s, as musical tastes shifted toward rock, new wave, and later hip-hop, many artists from Anka's era struggled to stay relevant. However, Anka's versatility as a songwriter allowed him to continue making music that appealed to both his longtime fans and new audiences. He diversified his output by writing for a variety of artists across different genres. For instance, he co-wrote the hit single Love Never Felt So Good, a collaboration with Michael Jackson that was originally recorded in 1983. Though it wasn't released at the time, the track was eventually released posthumously in 2014, becoming a global hit and reaffirming Anka's enduring relevance in the industry. During the 1990s, Anka shifted his focus more towards live performances, particularly in Las Vegas, where he became a staple act. His shows, known for their energy and his deep connection with the audience, highlighted his enduring appeal as a live performer. Anka's ability to reinvent his performances, often incorporating his vast catalog of hits with contemporary arrangements, kept his shows fresh and appealing to a wide range of audiences. His residency in Las Vegas also underscored his status as a consummate entertainer, capable of captivating audiences night after night. Anka's later career also saw him exploring new musical projects that expanded his creative horizons. In 2005, he released the album Rock Swings, a unique collection of contemporary rock and pop songs reimagined in a big band style. The album featured Anka's renditions of songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, Wonderwall by Oasis, and Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden. The project was both a commercial and critical success, showcasing Anka's ability to bridge the gap between different musical genres and eras. The album's success led to a follow-up, Classic Songs My Way, 2007, which featured duets with modern artists and further cemented Anka's reputation as a versatile and innovative musician. Throughout his later career, Anka remained active in songwriting, producing, and performing, all while managing his personal life, which included 5 marriages and 6 children. His relationships and family life, while sometimes tumultuous, were important aspects of his later years. Anka's autobiography, My Way, 2013, offers an intimate look at both his professional and personal life, providing fans with a deeper understanding of the man behind the music. The book delves into his experiences in the music industry, his friendship with Frank Sinatra, his marriages, and his role as a father, offering a candid portrayal of his journey. Anka's personal life also played a significant role in his music. His marriage to Anna Oberg in 2008 and their subsequent divorce in 2010 was a highly publicized affair, largely due to the custody battle over their son, Ethan. Anka eventually won sole custody of Ethan in 2017, a rare outcome in such cases, reflecting his determination and commitment as a father. This period of his life highlighted his resilience and his ability to navigate personal challenges with the same determination he applied to his career. In the 2010s and beyond, Anka continued to perform worldwide, delighting audiences with his vast catalog of hits. His performances often included stories from his decades-long career, offering fans a nostalgic journey through the history of popular music. He remained a beloved figure, not just for his music, but for his enduring presence in the entertainment industry. In 2020, Anka released Making Memories, his first album of original material in more than a decade. The album featured collaborations with a variety of artists, including Olivia Newton-John and Andrea Bocelli. It was a testament to Anka's continued relevance and his ability to connect with artists from different generations. The album was well received, with critics praising Anka's ability to blend his classic sound with contemporary influences. As of 2024, Paul Anka's legacy as one of the most influential figures in popular music remains intact. He has sold more than 100 million albums worldwide, written hundreds of songs, and has been inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. His ability to reinvent himself, to stay relevant across multiple generations, and to continue creating music that resonates with audiences is a testament to his extraordinary talent and work ethic. Anka's later career is also marked by his philanthropic efforts. He has been involved in various charitable endeavors, using his platform to support causes close to his heart. Whether through benefit concerts, donations, or raising awareness, Anka has leveraged his fame to make a positive impact on the world, further solidifying his legacy as not just a musician, but as a humanitarian. In addition to his ongoing music career, Anka has embraced the digital age, using social media and streaming platforms to reach new audiences. His ability to adapt to the modern music landscape, while maintaining the classic elements that made him a star, speaks to his enduring relevance and his commitment to his craft.
At 84 years old, Paul Anka has seen it all: fame, fortune, heartbreak, and history. But now, in the twilight of his legendary career, he's finally revealing the one chapter he kept sealed for decades: his complicated, emotional, and at times terrifying relationship with Frank Sinatra. For years, Anka called Sinatra a friend, a mentor, even a brother. But behind the glitz and glamour was something darker, an undercurrent of control, silence, and unspoken fear. In a new interview, Anka doesn't just honor the legend, he dismantles it. What he witnessed inside Sinatra's circle, what he was asked to do, and what he refused to become, it changes everything. This isn't just a tribute, it's a confession. And it's the story Paul Anka swore he'd never tell, until now. Before he was a household name, Paul Anka was just a teenager from Ottawa, with a pencil, a piano, and a dream louder than anyone around him could understand. At 15, he wrote Diana, a heartbreak anthem that shot him into the spotlight overnight. He wasn't just a performer, he was a songwriter, a self-made force with a voice beyond his years. By 18, he had written hits for other stars, toured the world, and stood shoulder to shoulder with the biggest acts of the 1950s. But it was one song, one timeless anthem, that would define both his career and another man's legacy forever. That song was My Way. Anka didn't write it for himself. He adapted it from a French tune, poured English lyrics into it, and crafted it specifically for Frank Sinatra, a man he both idolized and feared. He wrote it late one night in New York City, alone in his hotel room, the words falling out of him like a eulogy for a man still alive. When he presented it to Sinatra, Frank didn't just like it. He claimed it, owned it, lived it. It became his signature, his send-off, his legend. And Paul Anka? He watched it happen. He watched My Way climb to mythical status, a song blasted at funerals, played during final acts, and quoted by presidents. Everyone knew Sinatra's voice. Few knew Paul Anka's pen had created it, and even fewer knew what that moment cost him. Because that song was more than music. It was a passport into Sinatra's world. Anka became the kid among giants. He wasn't officially part of the Rat Pack, but he was close enough to feel the heat. He saw it all: the champagne, the after-hours clubs, the quiet deals, the backstage whispers. He learned quickly that admiration came with conditions, and loyalty was never optional. From the outside, it looked like Anka was living the dream. But from the inside, he was watching a myth in motion, knowing full well he'd given Sinatra the final soundtrack to his legend. And in doing so, stepped into a world where nothing, not even a hit song, came without a price. Being close to Frank Sinatra wasn't just about glamorous parties and standing ovations. It was about surviving a world that operated by its own brutal set of rules. For Paul Anka, stepping into Sinatra's orbit was like stepping into a high-stakes poker game where the chips weren't just money. They were reputation, access, and control. Sinatra didn't simply invite you into his circle. He allowed it, and that allowance came with invisible strings no one dared pull. The Rat Pack wasn't just a group of entertainers. It was a machine. And Sinatra sat at the top like a king whose approval could launch careers or end them. Paul Anka, still young and wide-eyed, quickly learned the hierarchy. Sammy Davis Jr. brought the soul. Dean Martin brought the swagger. And Frank? He brought the silence. The kind that could chill a room and shut down conversations with a single glare. Anka has said in recent years that the power Sinatra held wasn't just artistic, it was political. "You didn't cross Frank," he said plainly. "You didn't tell him no. You played the game or you disappeared." He tells stories now, carefully with deliberate pauses, about nights in Vegas where men with no official titles gave instructions, about phone calls that came from associates before a big show, about moments when even Frank seemed nervous, because some of the people around him weren't just fans or promoters. They were something else entirely. There was a weight to being inside Sinatra's circle, a price for proximity. Paul knew that every joke told, every deal made, every song sung on stage came with eyes watching from the shadows. It wasn't paranoia, it was protocol. And yet, through all of it, Paul played along. He smiled, he shook hands, He wrote songs. Because to defy Sinatra wasn't just career suicide, it was dangerous. Frank's world ran on loyalty, and the cost of betrayal wasn't measured in headlines. It was measured in silence, in doors closed forever, in favors reversed. Anka was in the room. He heard the whispers. He saw the deals. But he also knew how to survive. Stay useful, stay respectful, and above all, stay quiet. There was one night Paul Anka has never been able to shake. It didn't happen on a stage or at a lavish Rat Pack gathering. It happened behind closed doors, in a Las Vegas dressing room that smelled like sweat, cigarettes, and stale tension. He was in his 20s, still riding the high of success, still basking in the glow of being the kid who wrote My Way. But that night, the glow faded, and the man he thought was his hero revealed just how cold the spotlight could be. Anka had shown up early, eager, maybe too eager. He'd brought new arrangements. He had ideas. He wanted to impress. But as he stepped into the room, Sinatra was already there, seated in silence, surrounded by two men in suits and a bottle of Jack that was already half gone. Paul offered a handshake. Frank didn't look up. Then came the words, sharp, dismissive, and delivered with the kind of disdain only Sinatra could lace into a whisper. "Don't forget who made that song matter, kid." It cut deeper than Anka expected. He wasn't just being put in his place. He was being reminded that no matter how talented he was, no matter how successful he became, he would never outrank the icon in the room. To Sinatra, My Way belonged to him. The world agreed. And Paul? He was just the kid who got lucky. Anka said nothing. He stood there, stunned, humiliated. He thought about firing back, but he knew better. He nodded, smiled faintly, and stepped away. That night, he performed like nothing happened, but something inside him cracked. That encounter didn't end their relationship, but it forever changed it. It was the moment Paul stopped being a fan. It was the night he understood that in Sinatra's world, gratitude was a currency that ran dry fast. Respect had a shelf life, and love was transactional. Years later, Anka would describe that night not as a betrayal, but as a turning point. "It was when I realized I was in the presence of greatness," he said, "but also in the presence of danger. Frank could love you on Monday and forget you on Tuesday." That night didn't break Paul. It taught him how to stand alone. Because after that, he never looked at Frank or fame the same way again. For years, the whispers followed Paul Anka like smoke, quiet, persistent, always trailing just behind him. Whispers about who Frank Sinatra was really connected to, about how business was handled behind closed doors, and about the invisible lines you didn't cross if you wanted to stay in the game. And Anka, always observant, always careful, saw more than he let on. Especially the night a contract appeared that he still remembers in perfect detail. It was during the early 70s, in a penthouse suite after a show in Chicago. The party had quieted down, and Paul was ushered into a side room with 3 men. One of them was a lawyer, though no one introduced him that way. The other 2 were simply friends of the family. They smiled. They poured drinks. Then they slid a piece of paper across the table. It wasn't a record deal. It wasn't a publishing agreement. It was something else, vague, open-ended, and written in language that didn't need to be explained. An understanding, they called it. The gist was clear. Paul would be part of a select network. He'd receive protection, access, favors. In return, certain gigs would be strongly encouraged. Certain payments wouldn't go through labels, and certain names wouldn't be questioned. Paul froze. He wasn't naive. He knew what he was looking at. He knew what it meant to sign, and what it meant to refuse. One of the men said casually, "Frank thinks this would be good for you. Wouldn't want to disappoint him." Another added, "You sign this, your family." But Paul Anka didn't sign. He smiled, thanked them, said he needed to run it by his own lawyer. He left the room with his pulse racing and didn't return to the party. The next few weeks were tense. A few calls went unanswered. A show he was scheduled to headline got mysteriously canceled. And then it passed. The pressure faded. The paper was never brought up again. But the memory stayed. To this day, Anka believes Sinatra never sent those men, but also never stopped them. That's how it worked, Paul later said. He didn't give orders. Things just happened. He survived because he was smart, because he never challenged the system. He sidestepped it, because he understood that in the world Sinatra ruled, saying no didn't always make you a target. Sometimes it just made you invisible. And Paul Anka was determined to stay visible, on his own terms, with his own name. My Way was the crown jewel of Paul Anka's songwriting career, and the crown that Frank Sinatra wore until the very end. It's one of the most iconic songs in history, a powerful anthem of defiance, reflection, and pride. But what most people don't know is that the man who wrote it rarely performed it himself. Not because he didn't love it, but because, for decades, it wasn't truly his anymore. Anka adapted the lyrics from a French ballad, poured his own soul into them, and crafted a song tailor-made for Sinatra's voice and persona. It was personal, poetic, and fearless. And when Frank sang it, it exploded. The song became his story. He performed it like it was carved from his own bones. To the world, My Way was Sinatra's autobiography. Paul Anka's name was in the credits, but lost in the roar of the legend. For years, Paul let it be. Out of respect, out of fear, out of complicated loyalty. It was like giving birth to something and watching someone else raise it, he once said. He avoided singing it live. He never tried to reclaim it. The song lived in Sinatra's shadow, and so did Paul's authorship of it. But the silence came at a cost. Every time My Way played at a funeral, graduation, or farewell, Anka felt a strange mix of pride and pain. It wasn't bitterness, it was distance. He had written something timeless, and yet he wasn't allowed to own it emotionally. The world didn't associate My Way with the quiet Canadian kid who wrote it in a hotel room. They associated it with the voice that roared from stages, the man who lived large, and the myth that overshadowed the melody. After Sinatra's death in 1998, Paul remained quiet. He didn't do a victory lap. He didn't reclaim the song. Instead, he mourned. And then, slowly, something changed. He began performing My Way again, this time with different eyes. He told the story behind it. He explained the heart that went into it. And in doing so, he slowly peeled the legend away from the lyrics. Now, in his 80s, Paul Anka sings My Way not as a tribute, but as a testimony. Not as Sinatra's anthem, but as a reminder that behind every icon, there's a songwriter who made it possible. Behind the stage lights and tuxedos, Paul Anka witnessed a side of Frank Sinatra that few dared to speak about, especially when it came to the women. To the world, Sinatra was a ladies' man, charming, romantic, magnetic. But to those inside his circle, there was another layer, one far less glamorous, and often deeply uncomfortable. And for a young Anka navigating that world, learning the unspoken rules became a matter of survival. There were rules, Anka said in a recent interview. You didn't flirt with the wrong woman. You didn't look too long. And you never, ever questioned who she came with. The message was clear. When Sinatra arrived with a woman, whether it was a Hollywood actress, a cocktail waitress, or someone less known, she was off limits, completely. Violating that rule, even accidentally, could end a friendship, a career, or worse. Anka tells stories now of lavish penthouse parties where women came and went under watchful eyes. Of girlfriends Sinatra kept close, sometimes for months, sometimes for nights. Of sudden disappearances. One night in Palm Springs, a young starlet was escorted out mid-party by two of Sinatra's men after laughing too loudly at another man's joke. She wasn't seen again in that circle. The tension was real. The power dynamics were crystal clear. And Paul, still young and ambitious, learned to smile, nod, and walk away. He admits there were times he wanted to speak up, times he felt something wasn't right. But in that world, silence wasn't cowardice. It was strategy. You didn't confront Frank, he said. You distanced yourself, quietly, carefully. He also saw how other men followed Sinatra's lead, adopting the same possessive attitude, mimicking his dominance, believing that power excused behavior. It was a culture that ran deep, protected by fame and insulated by fear. Now, at 84, Paul looks back with clarity. He doesn't try to cancel or condemn, but he doesn't sugarcoat either. He acknowledges the darkness behind the charisma, the pressure behind the glitz, and the women who became props in a kingdom built on charm and control. He stayed quiet back then, because speaking out meant exile. But now, he's ready to say what everyone else was too afraid to. For decades, Paul Anka was the loyal gentleman of showbiz, well-dressed, well-spoken, and famously tight-lipped. When people asked about Sinatra, he smiled. When pressed about the Rat Pack, he deflected with charm. But behind that polished exterior was a man carrying a weight he never fully unpacked. A weight that came from staying silent in a world that demanded compliance. So why didn't he speak sooner? Because back then, Anka said, you didn't survive by telling the truth. You survived by protecting it. The truth was complicated. Frank Sinatra was his hero, his mentor, the man who gave his song life. But he was also volatile, controlling, and surrounded by people who didn't take kindly to criticism, especially from someone they saw as the kid in the room. Paul knew that airing grievances could turn dangerous, maybe not physically, but professionally. And for someone like Anka, who'd worked his way to the top from nothing, the risk wasn't worth it. He had a family to protect, a career to preserve, and an audience to entertain. Nobody wanted the kid with the pen to make waves, he said. They just wanted me to keep writing songs. So he stayed in the background, even as he watched the machine protect itself. He witnessed the rewriting of legacies in real time. He watched men get elevated while others, some just as talented, disappeared. He saw silence rewarded and truth punished. But time does something strange. It loosens the grip of fear. It sharpens memory. And eventually, it makes you ask, what was I protecting? Anka reached that crossroads in his 80s. With most of the old guard gone and nothing left to lose, he decided to stop holding back. This isn't revenge, he clarified. It's release. For the first time, he's telling the full story. Not just the headlines and handshakes, but the tension, the manipulation, and the moments when the price of fame almost outweighed its benefits. Paul Anka doesn't want sympathy. He doesn't want applause. He wants the truth to exist. Because legends are often built on silence, and at 84, he's done being quiet. At 84, Paul Anka isn't seeking redemption. He isn't looking for headlines or rewriting his past to fit a trend. What he's doing now is far more powerful. He's reclaiming his truth. After a lifetime in the shadow of Frank Sinatra's legend, Anka has finally stepped into the light with a voice not of rebellion, but of reflection. His words aren't bitter, they're clear, and for the first time, they're his. He's no longer the teenager trying to impress the Rat Pack. He's no longer the songwriter watching his anthem get claimed by another man. He's the survivor, the observer who lived through the golden age of show business without being swallowed by it. And now, his legacy is being redefined, not just as the man behind My Way, but as the man who finally found his way. What Paul Anka reveals in these later years peels back decades of myth-making. Sinatra will always be a towering figure in American music, but Anka is reminding the world that even legends cast shadows, and someone has to live in them. For too long, the story of My Way and Anka's role in it was a footnote. For too long, the nuances of their relationship, the closeness, the control, the reverence, and the fear, were buried under nostalgia and old Hollywood glamour. But now, Paul Anka is writing the final verse. And this time, it's not for someone else to sing. He's performing My Way with a different energy, less a tribute, more a declaration. Each lyric now drips with layered meaning, as if he's not just telling Sinatra's story anymore, but his own. And as the spotlight dims and his voice carries through theaters packed with fans who now know the truth, one thing becomes clear. Paul Anka never needed to borrow greatness. He had it all along. Now, as his words echo louder than ever, he's not just closing the book on his past with Frank Sinatra. At 84 years old, Paul Anka has lived a life most can only dream of. A singer, songwriter, and performer who rose to fame as a teenager, he has crossed paths with legends from Frank Sinatra to Elvis Presley. But among all the names and faces, one figure has always stood apart for him: Marilyn Monroe. For decades, Paul kept his memories of her locked away, choosing not to reveal the details of what he saw, what he heard, and what he felt during those fleeting but unforgettable encounters. But now, with the weight of age and the wisdom of hindsight, he finally opens up. His words are not just about Marilyn the star, but about Norma Jean, the woman behind the image. And what he reveals is not the glamorous Hollywood fantasy the world has clung to. It is something raw, emotional, and deeply human. For the first time, Paul Anka tells his truth about Marilyn Monroe, and the revelations may change the way you see her forever. It was the late 1950s, and Paul Anka was barely out of his teens when fame came crashing down on him like a tidal wave. With Diana topping charts around the world, he suddenly found himself thrust into a glittering world of stardom that seemed untouchable to the average person. Hollywood had opened its golden gates, and Anka was one of its newest guests. At the same time, Marilyn Monroe was already a cultural phenomenon. She wasn't just a movie star, she was the embodiment of allure, glamour, and tragedy all rolled into one. Everywhere she went, people stopped in awe. To the world, she was untouchable, but behind the lights, she was searching for real connections, people who would see her for more than just the blonde bombshell on screen. Paul remembered the first time he saw her as if it were yesterday. It wasn't on a movie set or at a red carpet premiere, but at an intimate Hollywood gathering where stars mingled freely without scripts or spotlights. Marilyn walked in, and the entire room shifted. She had that rare kind of presence, gentle but commanding, vulnerable yet magnetic. For Paul, a young man navigating fame, the sight of her was both overwhelming and unforgettable. Their introduction was simple: mutual friends, casual conversation, the kind of meeting one might expect in the small circle of Hollywood elite. But what surprised Paul was how genuine she was. Beneath the beauty, there was an almost childlike innocence in the way she laughed, in the way she asked questions about his music and career. Marilyn had met countless celebrities, but with Anka, she wasn't the diva or the screen siren. She was just a woman curious about a young singer making his way in the world. Paul would later describe this encounter not as a brush with Hollywood royalty, but as a moment where two human beings, one at the start of his journey, the other already weighed down by the burdens of her fame, crossed paths. It wasn't a long or elaborate interaction, but it left an impression that would last a lifetime. For Anka, Marilyn wasn't just another name in his long list of acquaintances. She represented something deeper, the fragility hidden within fame. And though he didn't know it then, this first meeting would spark memories he would carry with him for more than 6 decades. To the outside world, Marilyn Monroe was the definition of perfection. Her photographs graced magazine covers, her films broke box office records, and her smile could light up an entire theater. But Paul Anka, even in his brief encounters with her, began to notice what few dared to acknowledge at the time. Behind the dazzling exterior was a woman in constant conflict with herself. He recalled how Marilyn had a way of turning on her charm like a light switch. Around crowds, she was luminous, every glance choreographed, every giggle perfectly timed. Yet, when the crowd's attention shifted away, her expression changed, almost as though she had slipped out of character and returned to being Norma Jean, the girl from Los Angeles, who had been swept up into a world she never fully belonged to. Paul remembered her silences most of all, while others would fill conversations with stories of fame, parties, and wealth. Marilyn often drifted into quiet moments, as if her mind was somewhere far away. She seemed fascinated by music, especially the emotional honesty in Paul's songs. He would later reflect that perhaps she admired music because it had the ability to express vulnerability in a way Hollywood never allowed her to. But with that fascination came melancholy. Paul noticed a fragility in her eyes, a loneliness that fame could never cure. She was surrounded by people constantly, agents, producers, photographers, and admirers, but somehow she looked lonelier than anyone in the room. It struck Paul deeply, even as a young man, that Marilyn was trapped in an endless performance. The world loved Marilyn Monroe, but few cared to know Norma Jean. Anka sensed the exhaustion in her voice when she spoke about her career, the pressure of always being told how to act, how to look, how to smile. She was at once the most admired woman in the world and the most misunderstood. For Paul, these private glimpses into her real self were unforgettable. Behind the glamour, she wasn't the confident goddess people imagined. She was human, vulnerable, and at times heartbreakingly lost. Paul would later admit that he often thought about her when reflecting on the dangers of fame, how adoration could be both a gift and a prison. And for Marilyn Monroe, that prison had bars no one else could see. What Paul Anka remembered most vividly about Marilyn Monroe weren't the glamorous entrances, the laughter echoing at Hollywood parties, or the blinding flash of cameras. It was the private, quieter moments that revealed who she truly was. He recalled conversations that felt almost out of place in the glittering world they both inhabited. Marilyn would often steer their talks away from fame and into the kind of subjects that showed she longed for something deeper. She would ask Paul about his songwriting, how he managed to put raw emotion into lyrics that resonated with millions. She seemed captivated by the idea that music could tell truths that acting often concealed. Sometimes she'd confess that she wished she could be more like that, real, unfiltered, free from the constant demand to be Marilyn. There were moments when she let her guard down entirely, and it was in those moments Paul saw a woman who craved genuine connection. She spoke of her struggles with love and trust, how the men in her life often saw her as a symbol rather than a person. Paul listened as she admitted her fear of being forgotten, of fading away once the lights went out. For a woman adored by millions, she carried an astonishing insecurity that shocked him. He described her as having a fragile honesty, the kind that would make you stop and realize you weren't speaking with a legend, but with a human being desperate to be understood. One memory stayed with Paul more than the rest. Marilyn, after a long evening, leaned in and said something he would never forget. "Everyone loves Marilyn Monroe, but who will love me when I'm not her?" It was a haunting statement, a window into the torment of someone living two lives, one for the world and one she could barely manage in private. For Paul, those words carried a weight he would remember for the rest of his life. They revealed the essence of the woman beneath the image, vulnerable, fearful, but deeply yearning for something real. These private moments, fleeting as they were, left Paul with an understanding of Marilyn that few others had. She wasn't just a star caught in the glare of Hollywood's spotlight. She was a woman searching for authenticity, trapped in a role she could never fully escape. And to Paul, that truth was far more powerful than any performance she ever gave on screen. When Paul Anka looked back on Marilyn Monroe's career, one thing became painfully clear to him. Hollywood didn't just create her, it consumed her. To the outside world, Marilyn was the ultimate success story. A girl from humble beginnings who became the most famous woman in the world. But Paul, even in his youth, could see the darker side of that narrative. The Hollywood machine treated her less like a person and more like a product. Executives, directors, and publicists molded every part of her identity, deciding how she should look, speak, and even think. Paul remembered hearing stories about how studios would schedule her every move, right down to what she ate and where she appeared. Behind the camera, Marilyn wasn't free, she was owned. Anka, as a rising star in the music business, saw similarities in how artists were treated in his own world, but with Marilyn, it was magnified 100 times. She was marketed not just as an actress, but as the very embodiment of desire, and Hollywood relentlessly profited from that image. To keep that illusion alive, they ignored her growing struggles, her fragile mental health, and her desperate attempts to be taken seriously as more than a pin-up girl. Marilyn yearned to be respected as a serious actress. She admired writers, intellectuals, and musicians, often surrounding herself with people who could challenge her mind rather than simply admire her beauty. But the industry rarely allowed that side of her to be seen. Paul would later say that Marilyn had two constant battles, one with herself and one with the system that controlled her. He believed the industry stripped her of the very things she craved: authenticity, control, and dignity. Instead, it forced her deeper into loneliness and self-doubt. What struck Paul the most was how Marilyn seemed aware of the trap but powerless to escape it. She once admitted to him in a quiet exchange that she felt like a commodity, a name on a marquee rather than a human being. Those words haunted Paul because he knew she was right. Hollywood was never designed to protect someone like Marilyn Monroe. It was designed to use her until there was nothing left to give. For Paul Anka, reflecting on her life decades later, this realization was perhaps the most tragic part of all. The same industry that made Marilyn a legend was the very thing that destroyed her. For decades, Paul Anka carried certain memories of Marilyn Monroe in silence. He had seen things, heard things, and felt things that he believed the world wasn't ready to hear until now. In his youth, Paul had been shocked by how different Marilyn was once the cameras disappeared. While the world saw her as radiant, he sometimes saw her broken. She confided in him, and though he was young, he understood that what she shared was too delicate to be used for gossip or headlines. One of the secrets Paul held close was the depth of Marilyn's isolation. She admitted to him that despite being surrounded by people, she often felt invisible. The men who claimed to love her, powerful actors, politicians, moguls, were enamored with the idea of Marilyn Monroe, not Norma Jean. To Paul, That distinction was heartbreaking. He recalled her once lowering her voice and saying, "They don't want to know me. They only want what I represent." Those words stayed with him his entire life. Paul also witnessed Marilyn's reliance on pills and alcohol, though in his day, such matters were rarely spoken of openly. She struggled to keep up the appearance of joy, while quietly battling exhaustion and dependency. To the public, she sparkled. To those close enough to glimpse behind the facade, she seemed constantly on the edge of collapse. Another secret Paul kept was her longing for a family. While others saw her as the ultimate seductress, she confessed her heartbreak over failed relationships, miscarriages, and the nagging feeling that she was destined to always be alone. Anka later admitted that Marilyn carried a sadness that no amount of applause could erase. He knew her words were not rehearsed or exaggerated. They were the cries of someone who desperately wanted a life beyond Hollywood's suffocating spotlight. He also remembered the way she spoke about power in Hollywood, how executives used her, discarded her, and threatened her whenever she tried to assert independence. Paul never repeated those confessions at the time, perhaps out of fear of retaliation from an industry that punished truth-tellers. Instead, he kept them locked away in his memory, guarded like fragile glass. Now, at 84, Paul reveals that Marilyn Monroe wasn't just destroyed by fame or bad luck, she was undone by a system that never saw her as a person. The secrets he carried all these years weren't meant to scandalize, but to humanize her. They paint a picture of a woman far more complex than the world ever imagined. When Paul Anka spoke about Marilyn's final days, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen the storm building long before it broke. Though their interactions were limited, he recalled the growing whispers in Hollywood during the early 1960s, rumors of Marilyn's instability, her dependence on pills, and her entanglements with powerful men whose names were whispered but rarely written down. Paul remembered that even when she appeared at public events, there was something noticeably different about her. The sparkle in her eyes seemed dimmer, her famous smile harder to sustain. To him, it felt as though she was living on borrowed time, pushing through each appearance with less energy, as though the performance of Marilyn Monroe was draining the life from Norma Jean. What haunted Paul most was the contrast. In private moments, she had confided her exhaustion, her fear that she was becoming a burden to those around her. She longed for peace, for a sense of belonging, yet she was surrounded by people who viewed her as a commodity. Her final phone calls, her erratic behavior on movie sets, her sudden disappearances from public appearances, all of it suggested a woman unraveling, struggling against forces too powerful to overcome. Paul often wondered whether Marilyn sensed what was coming. He described her as someone who seemed to be looking over her shoulder, as if chased by shadows the rest of the world couldn't see. Some say she was haunted by her failed marriages. Others point to her rumored affairs with the Kennedy brothers, while still others believe the Hollywood machine itself was complicit in her downfall. Paul didn't claim to know the full truth, but he admitted there were conversations Marilyn had with him that hinted at a deep despair. He recalled her once saying that sometimes she wished she could disappear, to walk away from it all, and live quietly, where no one would expect her to be perfect. When news broke on August 5, 1962, that Marilyn Monroe had been found dead at just 36 years old, Paul was shaken to his core. Like millions around the world, he was devastated. But unlike most, he knew that behind the headlines was a woman who had cried for help long before her final night. He kept his thoughts private then, refusing to fuel speculation. But deep down, he always believed her death was the tragic conclusion of a life suffocated by fame, loneliness, and the relentless pressures of an industry that refused to see her humanity. For Paul Anka, Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a passing memory from his youth. She became a symbol of what fame could do to a person's soul. In the decades after her death, as his own career soared and evolved, he often found himself thinking back to those brief but powerful encounters with her. They left an imprint that never faded. Paul admitted that Marilyn changed the way he looked at success. While others chased wealth and adoration, he was reminded of the emptiness that could lie beneath the applause. Seeing Marilyn's struggles firsthand made him wary of the illusions of celebrity. It taught him to value control over his own career, to never let the industry dictate every part of his life the way it had dictated hers. He would later confess that some of the choices he made, whether it was walking away from certain contracts, pushing back against executives, or reinventing himself when the industry tried to box him in, were all influenced by the ghost of Marilyn Monroe. She became, in a sense, a silent guide for him, a warning etched into his conscience. But it wasn't just professional lessons. On a personal level, Paul carried with him the sadness of what he had seen in her, the loneliness, the yearning to be loved for who she really was. That memory made him more protective of the relationships in his own life. It reminded him not to take real connections for granted. Marilyn's fate became a mirror he held up whenever fame threatened to pull him away from authenticity. In interviews years later, Paul would sometimes speak vaguely about the darker side of show business, but he rarely mentioned Marilyn by name. Out of respect, he kept her secrets, but she was always there in the background of his thoughts. Even as he wrote timeless songs for legends like Sinatra and Tom Jones, and as he reinvented his career for new generations, the memory of Marilyn remained a quiet undertone in his story. He often wondered if things might have been different had Hollywood treated her with more compassion. Would she have lived longer, found true happiness, been remembered not as a tragedy, but as a triumph? Those questions haunted him. At 84, when Paul finally opened up, it wasn't to sensationalize her memory, but to share the lessons he learned from her life. Marilyn Monroe taught him, without ever meaning to, that fame is a fragile bargain, one that can give you the world while quietly taking your soul. When Paul Anka finally decided to speak openly about Marilyn Monroe, more than 6 decades had passed since her untimely death. At 84 years old, he knew he wasn't just sharing a story. He was sharing a piece of history, a perspective that only someone who had been there could give. For years, he chose silence, out of respect. He feared that revealing too much would turn Marilyn's memory into tabloid fodder, the very thing she had spent her life trying to escape. But as time went on, Paul realized that silence, too, could be a kind of betrayal. He had seen a side of her the world didn't know, and he believed it was finally time to tell that truth. Paul explained that Marilyn was not the flawless goddess history had painted her to be, nor was she merely the tragic victim of conspiracy theories and scandal. She was, in his words, a human being caught in the middle of a storm she never asked for. His memories stripped away the mythology and replaced it with something far more haunting: authenticity. He remembered her laughter, her insecurities, her confessions whispered in quiet corners. He remembered the way she seemed to glow when people adored her but fall silent when she feared they only loved the illusion. To Paul, Marilyn wasn't a mystery. She was painfully clear. She wanted what everyone wants: love, acceptance, and peace. The tragedy was that she sought those things in an industry built to deny them. When asked why he waited so long to speak, Paul admitted it took him decades to process what he had seen. In his own career, he had to navigate fame, exploitation, and pressure. He survived, but not without scars of his own. Looking back, he realized that everything Marilyn had feared, everything she had warned him about in those private moments, was true. Fame is a double-edged sword. It can give you the world, but it rarely gives you freedom. As he spoke about her in later interviews, Paul's voice carried both reverence and sorrow. He did not want to sensationalize her death or rehash the endless debates about whether it was an overdose, an accident, or something darker. For him, the real tragedy wasn't how she died, it was how she lived. A life of constant scrutiny, loneliness in crowded rooms, and a desperate need for authenticity that Hollywood never allowed her to have. Paul ended his reflections with a bittersweet truth. Marilyn Monroe will always be remembered, but not always for the right reasons. The world remembers the icon, the blonde bombshell, the the scandal, and the mystery, but few remembered the woman, the one who listened to music late into the night, who longed for family, who cried over being misunderstood, and who once asked a young singer if anyone would love her when she wasn't Marilyn. At 84, Paul Anka finally broke his silence, not to add to the myths, but to give Marilyn the humanity she was so often denied. His truth was simple but powerful. Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a legend, nor just a tragedy. She was a person. And perhaps, if the world had cared more about Norma Jean than Marilyn, her story might have ended differently. And so, after 60 years, Paul Anka's words echo as both a confession and a warning. Fame is fleeting, but the human heart, the need to be truly seen, remains eternal.